All right. In the past, personally, I've been a rather callous individual whose focus was on being able to beat other people up. Now, I didn't actually go around beating people up all the time or something like that, but I was very focused on the ability to do so, and I put my pride in my ability to fight. I didn't put my pride in the ability to help other people who are suffering. I think as cosmic punishment, God made me suffer. He made me homeless. He made me terrified of going to hell. He made me face death, potential death, multiple times. He's given me situations where people I know keep dying every half year. So that's about 2 people a year for about 4.5 years so far. And he's made me get shot in the guts before. Um, so I learned the hard way to have sympathy for those who are poor and suffering. What I would like to say is that there's a common error in judgment where someone can say you have the sin of empathy or you have the sin of no empathy. The sin of empathy is only caring about someone else's pleasure, and the sin of no empathy is not caring about someone's suffering at all. In between, you understand their emotional state, but you have an objective moral standard as well. So you want them to behave well, and you'll reward them for that, and you don't want them to behave badly, and you'll punish them for that. However, if they're just plain suffering and they're poor and miserable and so on, you'll help them out with something small maybe, but something that shows someone at least cares a little bit about them enough to give something from the heart to them. And it could be as small as like 1, 2, or 3 cigarettes and lighten a cigarette up for them so they can smoke it if they don't have a lighter themselves. And I found like a couple people have come back to me after I've done that for them, and they've been like, "Oh man, wow, you're a lifesaver, and you really helped me out that time, and I'm so glad you care," and so on. Um, so yeah, I've turned over a new leaf, and if anyone has a problem with my approach to things and thinks I'm not militant enough against the left or against uh, undesirables of society, let's say, if I'm a little soft on them in my arguments and my rhetoric and so on, just know that I've experienced what they've experienced, and I don't have a lot of empathy in the usual sense. I'm not what's called an empath, which is usually just an asshole. But um, I'm not empathetic particularly much at all. Like, I had to learn through my own experience of the situation to have sympathy for those who are having the similar situation. I had to learn the hard way through my own experience of that particular thing. I couldn't look at them and be like, "Oh, I understand how you feel." Now, it's not necessarily psychopathy or sociopathy in my case. It's literally autism. And a bad upbringing that I understand abused children have and so on. So I understand why people grow up to be a little messed up in the head and inappropriate and so on. Um, I understand why people take drugs and stuff to try and forget their pasts and their traumas and so on. Um, but ultimately, I don't think that's helpful. And I mean, the thing about the cigarettes thing is that the people I give cigarettes to probably already smoke them on occasion at least, and they probably do harder drugs to be honest. So mind destroying drugs, soul destroying drugs, like actually body destroying drugs, not like cancer like 50 years later, but like within like half a year their body is destroyed, kind of doing those drugs. So I just give them palliative care basically and try and alleviate some of their suffering in the here and now and show them at least someone cares about their happiness a little bit. And don't doubt my hatred of the left. The left has destroyed so many people, and I've watched it happen. And I'm not talking about cancel mobs or cancel culture. I'm talking about the drug addicts themselves and the homeless and so on. We had a functioning society in my province not too long ago, 8 years ago, and it was functioning for a good 50 years before that at least. And the left ruined that in 8 years. I guess I'm trying to be like Frodo to Smeagol, in a sense, to some of these people in a way. But, that's kind of how I approach it in a sense. That's how I would describe it. Trying to be like Frodo to Smeagol for these people. So I'm not necessarily going to excuse everything they do that's wrong or something like that. But I'm trying to, if I don't see them doing actual evil myself, then I'm not going to assume the worst about them necessarily. There's a couple of people once in a while that seem like they're going to be entitled or rude or something like that, and I'm like, just pretend I don't see them kind of in a way. But it's about the attitude and how they carry themselves. You know. But my emphasis on this channel is I don't want to be like James Lindsay, but I want to guard the right wing's soul from corruption, from following in the footsteps of the left in spirit, not necessarily declared values or wording or something like that, but in the spirit of the left. I don't want the right wing to become that. So if I seem a little hippy dippy or like meek and mild, that's a personal affectation and approach to these things a little bit that I've learned to take over the years for society's undesirables. And I view the left as undesirable as well, so that's kind of why I extend that to them, basically. Trusting that other people will bring necessary justice that I cannot bring to the left and the undesirables when necessary. Basically. So it's other people's job to do the justice, and I'm doing the charity, basically, the missionary work, possibly, to try and convince them to come to our side and accept our way of world. I realize that I'm not necessarily a diplomat, and I'm not even trying to be a diplomat particularly much, except in my statements about the way the world works, as far as I can tell, that hopefully provide a bit of nuance and appreciation for human complexity of life and the human condition in a more detailed way that would soften up slightly in certain situations the right wing's approach to politics and the culture war. And what I would say finally is that I want the right wing to win, basically. I want distributist, prudentialist, Orrin McIntyre, Sargon of Akkad, Nick Freitas, Christian Hines, Andrew Clavin, C.S. Lewis style life, basically. I want to be the most leftist person there is in the room, so to speak, in society. Myself, basically. I mean, I realize it's not going to happen, but you know what I mean? Kind of what I would be happy with, basically. But, oh god, I forgot what I was going to say for a second. Okay, so I was saying a list of people that I want to win. Oh, right, I remember now. Ruling a majority of the population in a coalition is not the same as direct activism against a smaller portion of society, a minority of society that's destructive, but ruling a majority coalition is not the same as activism against a destructive minority. So Andrew Klavan's "This Is Fine" video that he released on this Friday, is talks about that kind of thing a little bit in more sort of in depth and so on. And I really like Andrew Klavan's work somewhat personally. It just happens to speak to me. I've always been a bit of a caretaker wannabe and so on. But anyways, ruling a majority is not the same as activism against a destructive minority. It means there's going to be some trade-offs at times. It means that not everyone's going to necessarily agree within your group of allies. And I don't want to use the allies term too much in this case. Or no, in politics I do want to use the term allies. But in community and society and culture and so on in general, I think allies is a really nasty word, and it's really corrosive and so on. Like when they talk about LGBT allies and so on, because they're constantly making everything out to be a fight, which is one of the reasons why the left is so destructive. The right wing has a hierarchy or a substrate or a systematic, not systemic, but systematic approach to antagonisms and hostilities and disagreements and levels and ranks of intensity and what to appropriately call it, and more care and attention given to disagreements of how to carry oneself and so on. The left just simplifies it as a friend-enemy. So that's one of the reasons why the left calls themselves loving when they're actually one of the most hateful people around, because they're like, I love everyone except you, and I hate all of you because you hate people and I don't. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so my care and attention is basically right now is an attempt to give subtlety, nuance, and details about the human condition that are a little more complex than just simple good and evil, while accepting the reality of actual good and actual evil, but trying not to simplify it beyond appropriate levels in reality. I might fail at this. I might be like a James Lindsay of a hippy dippy, meek and mild, sort of soft-spoken jerk off. I am trying to make this channel to become sort of famous and maybe a little wealthy, not super rich, but a little money, so I can get a wife and have kids and so on. You know, I mean, I'm not going to begrudge anyone trying to make money so they can have a family. You know, so I hope no one does that for me, basically. At least as long as I'm attempting to be honest. You know. Anyways. Yeah, so that's why I'm going to be focused on softening the right in certain areas of life and trying to bring up situations where the slop, rage bait, rotating siren alert right wing doesn't match the best version of the right wing and is not morally consistent or logically consistent in its worldview compared to the best right wing, as far as I can tell. At least according to my values, which I don't know if people share, but I have learned a lot from Christianity, even if I'm not the best Christian. And that's kind of where I'm taking this from in my morals and so on. I have a couple masculine Bronze Age morals and so on. But, you know, I'm trying to be as Christian as possible, basically, because I believe that's what's necessary for society. And I want to bring that forwards and to bring lost sheep into the fold if possible, if only by convincing those closest to becoming Christian to not be performative and narcissistic and holier than thou entirely, but rather sober-minded, even-handed, and measured in their approach to justice, charity, and the culture war. That's all I'm trying to do at this point. And by comporting themselves to be not beautiful losers, they must fight like hell, but they must win the culture war, they must win war, and then against the enemy, and then when the enemy surrenders, they must win the peace with their neighbors, if the neighbors are the enemy in the culture war or the war, basically. Win the war against them, win the peace with them, basically. That's my stance. Anyways, thanks for watching.